The crosshair trembles, then steadies. Snow hangs in the air like ash that changed its mind. Your cheek is pressed to cold wood. It drinks the heat from your skin as if thirst had a shape. A heartbeat. Another. Another. You count in a language that doesn't need words. Wind threads the trees and tugs at the smallest things. A strand of hair escaped from a cap, a loose thread on a glove, a thought you were sure you'd tied down. The world shrinks to a circle of glass and a narrow corridor of possibility. Exhale. Before you drift off, take a moment to subscribe, but only if stories told in whispers are your kind of thing. And tell us where you're listening from, or which image lingers with you the most. You're listening to Echoes of War. The breath leaves you in a ribbon so thin it almost isn't there. A finger finds the wall of the trigger and rests, not pushing, not asking, only listening. Somewhere beyond the scope, a shape shifts against bark that learned to stand still. You feel the rifle's weight become your weight, the stock a spine you borrow. Ice gathers on lashes. Time gathers on will. The decision, when it comes, feels like patience changing state. Then, the pace relents. The forest returns to its larger grammar, trunks like columns, a white floor crossed by fox prints, a sky the color of forged metal cooling. You're lying in a world that would rather not be disturbed. Every noise is expensive here, a button brushing canvas, a boot whispering to snow. The air is so clear it seems to ring. Even silence has edges. You slow your blood because the earth prefers it that way. You learn to measure distance in breaths and courage in stillness. Somewhere, an axe answers a tree far off. The blow arrives after the motion, a reminder that sound is always late to its own body. Closer, a crow remarks on the day and then forgets you on purpose. You're standing now, in a camp that should not exist. Rows of targets, dark on pale, a line of women with rifles slung like promises. A whistle rises, falls. Names are called that will be recorded in notebooks and on stones and in other people's children. A young instructor traces frost from a sight, as if polishing the future. The ground is stamped with the footsteps of 1,000 mornings, each one learning to harden into calm. Hands crack and mend. Letters arrive and do not. Tea that tastes like iron. Bread that remembers warmth. You practice lying perfectly still while time passes like weather through the body. Years later they would say it started as a necessity and became an art. Patience turned into a weapon. Breath taught to carry weight. They would cite numbers with careful mouths. Thousands trained, many deployed, hundreds who would never speak loudly again. Somewhere beyond the wire, a front line crawls like a long, low cloud. Cities become plural where they used to be singular. Somewhere beneath this sky, a woman writes her name in a small notebook, then learns to erase it from snow. Somewhere inside the glass circle of a scope, a history narrows, then opens. Chapter 1. School of Stillness. The Oath of Breath. Morning begins with frost that doesn't trust the sun. The camp is new enough to smell of cut pine, old enough to carry tiredness in its boards. A sign creaks, a kettle hisses, boots line up with the obedience of tools. You join the row not because anyone asked you to. The asking happened elsewhere, when streets emptied, when black smoke practiced writing over neighborhoods, when brothers vanished into distances that kept moving. An instructor with winter in her posture holds up a rifle like a question. No speeches. Only instructions that feel older than language. Weight, balance, eye, breath. The oath is not taken with a hand in the air, but with lungs learning to fold and unfold on command. The first target is not a silhouette. It is yourself, frantic and untrained, and the day's lesson is how to let that person go without cruelty. You learn the geometry of lying down. Elbows find purchase in crusted snow. The earth meets you with the authority of something that existed before fear. A scarf is pressed against a cheekbone to make a cradle. The stock fits the slope between bone and muscle like a story that finally found its teller. Breath in 4 counts. Gather, hold, soften, release. Again. Again until the body obeys not out of force, but out of relief. Wood and metal. The rifle is named in the way you name a ship. Not aloud, not to be heard, but to be kept. Bolt slides, chamber answers, the small steel music of readiness. You memorize the sound because you must. Later, in snowdrifts that take your blood temperature and keep it, even small noises become declarations. There is an anatomy to accuracy. Cheek weld, sight picture, trigger wall, follow through. Your world narrows to 2 points of light, and a line your eye learns to draw without trembling. At 40 meters, the target is a rumor. At 100, it becomes a truth that accepts revision. At 200, it waits, patient as a witness. The lesson isn't how to pull a trigger. It's how to refuse to hurry. Around you, the choir of practice. Smell of oil and canvas. The iodine bitter sting of cold on a cracked knuckle. A woman to your left is 19 and cannot stop blinking in the wind. A woman to your right is 31 and does not blink at all. The range officer paces like a metronome, steadying the collective pulse. A flag lifts, drops. The simplest theater of war. The rehearsal before the world asks the same gestures to mean consequence. Numbers in the snow. They tell you the numbers without telling you the cost. How far a bullet drifts when the wind comes slant. How much the barrel rises after breath leaves the mouth too quickly. How many seconds you can hold a sight picture before the eye invents movement where none exists. You scratch calculations into the margin of a notebook whose paper is already tired. Angle, range, temperature, a ledger of air. At dusk, lectures on camouflage, how not to be a person. Cloth becomes bark with the right patience. White cloth becomes landscape. Twine becomes a small forest if you let it. You sow dead grass into netting until your fingers forget blood. Faces are dulled with ash that once was wood that once was shade. The mirror disappears from the barracks. The world will be your mirror now, and it prefers you unrecognizable. At night, a stove whispers. Someone reads numbers aloud to keep from counting worries. A letter is opened with ceremonial care. Another is not. You sleep with the metal's memory in your palms and dream that snow can hear your thoughts. If it can, it is kind enough not to answer. First winter field. Orders arrive without adjectives. A small team, a white field, a line of dark trees. You move before light because light has preferences you cannot afford. The world reduces itself to things that matter. The pressure of snow beneath, a branch that will betray you if you forget it exists, a horizon disciplined into grey. The first position is a sculpted hollow in a drift, just wide enough to invite stillness to become a room. You slide into it as if returning to a shape you were cut from. Blanket, scope, a little bread. Silence like a hallway that narrows, then narrows again. Hours teach a truth that training only suggested. The body is not the enemy, impatience is. A toe begins to burn with cold, then forgets the word burn. An itch arrives and insists, then leaves when you ignore it without pride. The rifle warms against your chest with the slow courtesy of shared intention. Through the glass, the edge of a road, a sentry who grows and shrinks with the wind's arguments, a truck that coughs its way into the day. When the moment comes, it does so without announcing itself. The sentry turns, looks past you into a part of the forest that never learned your name. The exhale is as brief as a blink you didn't take. The trigger breaks like ice under a careful foot. The rifle speaks and then is silent, embarrassed by its own volume. On the road, a figure folds into the shape of a rival. No celebration. Only recounting. Distance, wind, heartbeat, time. Only the slow practice of erasing your presence. Snow drawn over snow, footprints negotiated with a branch, heat returned to air in long, courteous threads. A crow remarks again and is not wrong. When you stand at last, the hollow in the drift keeps your shape for a second, then decides it never knew you. You leave the field as you found it, white, interrupted only by the idea of interruption. Behind you, a small quiet widens and keeps widening long after you stop listening. Chapter 2. Names in the Ledger. The list. The clerk's pen moves like a winter insect, quick, exact, without warmth. Paper whispers beneath it. Columns rise. Surname, year, province, weapon, confirmed. You stand among them, hundreds of names that will later become figures, then ghosts, then memories carried by statistics. For now, you are ink still wet. The ledger is a quiet kind of war. Each name written means one fewer that the enemy will write. You sign with a glove removed, hand trembling not from fear but from cold that feels like responsibility. Your breath blurs the page. The ink responds by blooming slightly, as if alive. No medals here, no speeches. Only a pencil scratching against rationed paper. Beside you, another woman hesitates before spelling her father's name. Not because she forgot it, but because it sounds like home and home must be spoken softly now. The clerk looks up, nods once, moves on. The war grows by one heartbeat at a time. Outside, a line of rifles rests against the wall like tall shadows waiting to be claimed. Wind blows through the corridor, flipping the edge of the page. A name disappears, then returns. The ink dries. The list lengthens. The day exhales. The numbers and the faces. They trained more than 2,000 women as snipers. About 500 reached the front. Few would return. The school near Moscow had become both womb and forge. Birch forests surrounding barracks built in a hurry and kept standing by will alone. From every province they came. Teachers, seamstresses, students, daughters of farmers who once hunted wolves for fur and now hunted men for necessity. Their average age was 20. Their patience older than empires. Instructors read weather reports like scripture. They drilled until night forgot their names. Identify, aim, exhale, disappear. Repeat until conscience learns to whisper instead of shout. One student, Zoya, carved tiny marks into her rifle stock, not for kills, but for days survived. Another, Valentina, refused to carve anything. She said the snow remembered better than she did. They laughed once, at breakfast, when the bread turned out to be sweet by mistake. The sound startled them. Joy was too loud for that place. The commandant kept the official records in a locked drawer, but she carried the true list in her head. Who slept, who shook, who hummed while cleaning her rifle to keep fear in tune. First departure. The orders came folded in brown envelopes, edges smudged with frost. Inside, units, coordinates, routes drawn in ink that looked almost red. A train waited, black smoke rising like a question it had asked too many times before. You board in silence, stepping over rails that ring underfoot. The car smells of wool, oil, and goodbye. Someone presses a photograph between planks, superstition or hope. Another woman ties her hair into a braid so tight it hurts less when it freezes later. The train lurches forward. Pines blur into grey bars outside the window. Inside, the air fills with the sound of cartridges clicking into magazines, a rhythm meant to drown out thought. They sing softly, at first. A song about rivers that freeze and thaw and always return. A song that pretends to be about water but is really about survival. At stations, civilians watch as the women disembark to stretch. A child stares at the rifles taller than their owners. A man crosses himself without knowing for whom. The world adjusts slowly to the idea that death might now have a woman's patience. The front line without lines. When the train stops for the last time, the station is a rumor of planks and smoke. Beyond it, snowfields stitched with wire, forests that breathe in the language of gunfire. Officers meet them with half-belief. Women, really? And full orders. You march east, boots grinding crusted snow into powder. Frost forms a thin armor on sleeves. Every kilometer erases part of the person you were. The front line isn't a line at all. It's a geography of waiting. Ditches become homes, trees become shields, maps become stories told over tin cups. When artillery speaks, it shakes snow from branches. When it stops, birds return as if nothing happened. Your unit digs in near Smolensk. A low ridge, a view of the road, the slow rhythm of trucks that never learn. The first night, you clean your rifle by candlelight, the flame shivering with every distant explosion. Each sound a reminder. Patience will be your ammunition, silence your disguise. Someone asks, barely above a whisper, will they ever know our names? No one answers. The question joins the cold and settles beside you, loyal as a shadow. The ledger back at camp closes for the night. Snow falls between the lines. The ink freezes in mid-word. But the story continues, out here, in white fields that pretend to be empty. Chapter 3. Through the Glass Circle. The forest that breathes. The forest doesn't sleep. It listens. Branches creak with the slow grammar of endurance. You move through it as though asking permission. The snow here is older, layered with the footsteps of those who came, fought, vanished. Your breath fogs, but the wind erases the proof. The column halts without sound. Hands gesture. Positions. You and another crawl forward, bellies flattening snow that sighs beneath you. The world has narrowed again. Scope, breath, pulse, wind. The only motion permitted is the blink of an eye, and even that must be negotiated with consequence. Frost forms along the barrel, a lace of patience. The finger rests, memory waiting for command. A truck rumbles into view on the road below, wheels carving sound into distance. Through the scope, the grey smear of uniforms, the flash of insignia. The reticle steadies. Cross, silence, will. You do not hear the shot. You feel it leave you. A current, a pulse, an answer. The man below folds into himself, as though remembering something sudden. The truck jolts, stops. Another shot. Another fold. Then the forest closes again, protective, indifferent. The instructor's voice returns in memory. Never shoot twice from the same place. You slide back, slow as thaw. Snow fills the hollow behind you. Soon it will be as though the earth has forgiven the interruption. You count. 1 breath, 2, 300 meters. You survive the return as carefully as you made the approach. When the unit regroups, no one speaks. Someone hands you tea the color of smoke. You drink it without tasting. Ludmilla. Her name will echo beyond these trees. Ludmilla Pavlichenko. By 25, she carried 309 confirmed kills. A historian would call her efficient. She would call herself focused. Before the war, she studied history. Now she writes it one trigger at a time. Her notebook lists not enemies but distances, wind speeds, lessons. Patience, one line reads, is the most precise weapon. She moves like water, quiet where it must flow, sharp where it must cut. Rumor says she could wait in a single position for 2 days without shifting more than a breath. Snow melts against her uniform and refreezes, sealing her into the landscape. When her rifle jams, she murmurs to it as to a living companion. When it fires true, she closes her eyes, not in relief, but in remembrance. Once, after a long shot across a valley, an observer whispered, "You're famous now." She answered, "Tell that to the snow." At Sevastopol, she fought until concussion left her ears full of the sea's echo. Later, in America, they would call her Lady Death. She smiled once at the headline, a small, amused curve that never reached her eyes. The pair. They are always paired, spotter and shooter, eye and breath. Yelena and Rosa. One counts the seconds between gusts, the other listens for metal against air. They trade the rifle when fatigue becomes betrayal. Trust is their camouflage. Without it, the snow would notice. In one engagement near Leningrad, Yelena sights an officer through broken glass. The reflection trembles with heat from a nearby fire. Rosa steadies her shoulder. A spark, a sound half swallowed, then stillness. The officer falls forward, hands open, surprised not by death but by its shape. Afterward, Rosa removes a shard of glass from her cheek, a gift from the window's collapse. Blood blooms briefly, freezes. They laugh, quietly, because the body insists on proof of living. Then they move again, footprints erasing themselves under new snowfall. The other side. Sometimes you see them, the German sentries through your scope, boys whose faces are too young for rank. They smoke, write letters, scuff boots against frozen rations crates. You study their patterns the way astronomers study stars: motion, distance, brightness, extinction. When the moment comes, you breathe for both of you. An intercepted diary, later translated, will mention ghost women in the woods. Soldiers will tie tin cans to fences to warn of movement, hang mirrors to catch sunflash, shoot at shadows out of fear. They will give the unseen enemy a myth: forest witches, white demons. They are not wrong, only imprecise. For every bullet fired, a silence follows that weighs the same. You carry that silence back to camp each night, folded neatly beside your weapon. No one needs to be told that ghosts are heavy. Counting. The ledger clerk in Moscow keeps updating the numbers. Names checked, missions logged, confirmations pending. Each digit a translation of breath into history. Each total a small obituary written in shorthand. But out here, counting changes meaning. You count distance to fire. You count seconds between heartbeats. You count the women still breathing in your unit each dawn. At some point, arithmetic gives up and becomes prayer. When command radios in congratulations, you answer with coordinates. When medals are promised, you accept the snow instead. It stays, it covers, it remembers without applause. The night stretches thin over the forest. Aurora flickers faintly above the horizon, a wound stitched in light. You sleep with the rifle near your chest, the wood warm from the day's labor. In dreams, the crosshair hovers over nothing. The world holds its breath, waiting for you to decide if mercy is also a form of aim. Chapter 4. The Frozen Front. City of Ash and Breath. The train stopped running days ago. Now supply sleds drag themselves along rails that forgot the sound of wheels. You walk beside one, hand on the frozen flank of a horse too tired to remember its own name. Ahead, a skyline broken into teeth. Behind, the echo of all that burned. Stalingrad, a city made of glass, dust, and promises. Every wall breathes smoke. Every basement becomes a lung for those still trying to live. When shells fall, the air thickens like wet wool. When they stop, the silence clings like frost on skin. You enter what used to be a factory. Windows gone, roof open to the slow snowfall. Steel beams jut upward, ribs of something colossal brought down mid-breath. Inside, soldiers heat soup over a shell case and laugh too loudly. You lie beside them, rifle across knees, and watch the sky through the hole in the ceiling. Stars shimmer, unconcerned. You count them until fear remembers it's supposed to exist. At dawn, orders. A vantage point on the riverbank. Frozen reeds, low mist, one rifle, one life at a time. The Volga groans under its own armor of ice. Across the water, silhouettes move, brief, dark gestures in a white world. You steady, exhale, and the city itself seems to hold its breath with you. Women in the ruins. They live among the bricks and echoes, nurses, snipers, signalers. Women who used to teach literature now decipher artillery coordinates. Those who once sewed dresses patch uniforms with thread scavenged from curtains. The front doesn't distinguish anymore. It only consumes. In a collapsed schoolhouse, a group cleans rifles beneath a mural of Lenin half erased by soot. A chalkboard still lists a lesson. Grammar, future tense. Someone laughs quietly at the irony. Another hushes her. Laughter costs warmth. You share a trench with a medic named Irina. She keeps her morphine in a teacup and her hope in a song she hums when the shelling pauses. When she sleeps, her hand curls around the cup as though guarding the possibility of mercy. Night. The wind slides through corridors that no longer have doors. The city glows faintly with burning oil, an aurora made of machinery. Somewhere a phonograph plays half a waltz, the record broken before the final note. You imagine finishing it in your head, and the thought becomes your lullaby. Across the Volga. Reinforcements come by barge, crawling through mist. You watch from the ruins as women ferry crates of ammunition across ice that cracks with each footstep. Their faces are wrapped in scarves stiff with frost. Their eyes shine with something beyond fear, recognition, perhaps, that history has already claimed them. When the shelling begins again, the river answers like a drum. Chunks of ice rise and fall, catching light from burning warehouses. A woman slips, catches herself, keeps moving. Each stride is defiance measured in meters. Later, when the last barge moors, you help pull ropes frozen into ropes of glass. Hands bleed, steam rises, and for one brief second, the whole front seems to exhale relief. Then another shell finds the pier, and the river closes its mouth. You crawl back into cover, ears ringing, breath shallow. The world contracts to pulse and echo. Irina presses cloth to your face, not yours, someone else's, and says nothing. No one speaks when mercy feels like betrayal of the living. White days, black nights. The siege deepens. Food becomes rumor, light a rare visitor. You count weeks by the color of the sky, lead in morning, ink by evening. Rats move openly now, bold as veterans. You do not chase them. They are competition and company both. A pot of snow melts into something pretending to be soup. You sip it like memory. One day, you trade a button for a candle. You light it at dusk, watch the wax pool like the slow passing of courage. Around you, snipers clean rifles with movements so practiced they seem choreographed. Outside, artillery breathes again, steady and impersonal. The candle gutters. The wax solidifies into silence. A letter arrives from the training camp. New names, replacements, women who haven't yet learned to flinch at the sound of their own pulse. You read it by what remains of the flame. Each name feels like both promise and warning. When dawn finally shows a hint of pink behind the smoke, you think of summer not as warmth but as color, proof that the world once used a different palette. You close your eyes and see green. It hurts more than hunger. The moment that holds. The target is a window on the far side of a square. A machine gun nest, noise carved into concrete. You and another sniper take turns. One observes, one breathes. Frost gathers on lashes until blinking feels like betrayal. A pause in the shooting. A cat crosses the street, fur gray with dust. It stops, looks up, and for an instant you share the same calculation. Distance, movement, survival. Then the machine gun opens again, and the cat becomes memory. You wait for the pattern, the reload pause, the moment where the world inhales. Through the scope, 2 helmets, a flash of metal. Exhale. A crack. Another. Silence that feels earned. When command tallies the report, it will list numbers. When history writes it, it will choose adjectives. But here now, it is only breath leaving and not returning. The snow begins again, slow and forgiving. Each flake lands softly on the rifle barrel, hissing into vapor. You hold still until even the steam forgets your name. Leitmotifs evolved. Breath, glass, patience, endurance. Historical thread expanded. Stalingrad siege, women in mixed roles, persistence under starvation and bombardment. Tone maintained, slow, cinematic, immersive. Chapter 5. Letters Never Sent. The unsent letter. You begin with the date and stop. Numbers feel too certain for days that keep changing shape. The pencil is short, the paper soft from being folded in a pocket that sweats through the cold. You write anyway, because language is another way to keep warm. Mama, I am learning to breathe like the forest. The trick is not to fight the air, but to invite it. I sleep with the rifle like we used to sleep with the cat in winter. For heat, for company, for the illusion that something is tame. You cross out the sentence. Too honest, too strange, too true. Try again. I am well. I eat. The sky is very clear at night. I think of the garden when the snow squeaks underfoot like clean floors. That stays. You describe nothing that would frighten her, which leaves very little to describe. You do not mention the man in the window, the river cracking like a voice, the way your hands shake only after the work is done. You draw a small birch leaf in the margin, a shape your hand remembers better than words. When the shelling resumes, the pencil pauses on the page. You fold the letter carefully, touch it to your lips, and slip it back into your breast pocket. It will travel when you can trust the distance between here and home. For now, the body becomes the envelope. Field post. The mail cart arrives like a superstition with wheels. Men and women gather without hurrying. Haste is for food and fire, not for words. A clerk reads names that sound like they are being rescued from snowdrifts. Kuznetsova, Zurovleva, Orlova. Some step forward. Some wait for the name that will not be called. You receive one from your sister. Inside, a pressed violet that somehow kept its color, a paragraph of weather, a report about neighbors you barely remember. She asks if you sleep. You answer in your head, yes, when the world lets me borrow its quiet. She asks if you're afraid. You answer to the paper, Not when I am working. Only before, sometimes after. She writes that the stove smells of apples because wood is scarce and someone found crates for kindling. You hold the page and inhale, trying to conjure apples from ash. Nearby, Irina opens a letter and laughs, a sound like Thor. Her brother tried to send her a plum. It arrived as a memory wrapped in tissue, the sweetness gone but the intention still whole. She licks the paper and says it tastes like July. For 1 minute, everyone believes her. When the cart leaves, the air feels emptier than before. Those without mail walk a little slower, as if the ground deserved an apology. You return to your post with a violet tucked inside your cap, a small, impossible summer above your eye. Intercepted fragments. Later, in a dugout half-roofed with doors and sandbags, someone translates captured notes. German script, angled and severe, turns soft in another mouth. The women in white are ghosts. They wait all day. We are told to shoot the snow. This is useless advice. I dream of a quiet room and an ordinary window. There is a rumor that one of them watched a man die and did not blink. I envy her and I am afraid of her. You listen without gloating. Their fear is not your medal. It is only proof that patience travels, from your body into theirs, arriving as dread. Another note speaks of hunger, of a mother's bread recipe written from memory to keep a son alive in thought, if not in stomach. You fold your hands and let the silence lengthen. War writes the same letter on both sides. It only changes handwriting. That night, you imagine the other sniper, the one you have not seen but feel, also writing by candlelight, also hiding her truest sentences inside a breast pocket for lack of trust in distance. The thought doesn't comfort you. It only makes the world larger and therefore harder to aim at. What the snow keeps. There are letters you never write because the addressee no longer exists in the shape you remember. There are letters you compose word by word in your head while lying in a drift, each syllable a measure of stillness. There are letters you burn for warmth before the ink has time to dry. The smoke smells faintly of confession. On a quiet afternoon that feels borrowed, you volunteer for courier duty. A narrow path, a packet of field post, a promise you can keep with your feet. The wind scrapes the surface of the snow until it shines like glass. Your reflection appears and disappears between drifts, a woman made of weather. Halfway there, you stop beneath a birch that leans as if listening. You take out your unsent letter to Mama and read it silently to the tree. It nods in the only way trees can, with shadow. When you reach the forward dugout, a young soldier accepts the packet as if it were medicine. He sets the bundle beside a stove with no flame and guards it with the seriousness of a vow. You leave before anyone asks you to read their letter aloud. Your voice does not want to be responsible for another person's hope. Evening lays itself over the front, thin and careful. You light a stub of candle and add one more line to the page you carry. I am still here. The snow is still here. I think we keep each other honest. You do not sign it. Some truths prefer to arrive without signatures. Outside, flakes begin again, each one a quiet syllable. They settle on the barrel, the birch, the unsent letter in your pocket. In the morning, if the wind is kind, your footprints will still be visible, a sentence across the white that trails off before it reaches the end. Chapter 6. The Duel Without Footsteps. The Whispering Line. The air has gone thin, almost private. Sound doesn't travel. It hovers. Somewhere beyond the birches, another breath matches yours. You don't hear it. You feel the echo, a twin pulse arriving a heartbeat late. The order came at dawn. Counter-sniper suspected in Sector 14. No name, no description, only coordinates and the warning. He waits longer than you will. You move with deliberate quiet, each step rehearsed, each pause a question the forest must answer. The snow complains once, then keeps your secret. Through the scope, nothing, just the disciplined absence that means someone is watching. You lower the rifle. The world holds its breath. Every branch looks guilty. Every shadow seems recently occupied. The duel begins the way most duels do, without ceremony, without witness. Two silences testing which will break first. Glass against glass. Days pass inside the same hour. You change position by inches, crawl beneath a fallen log that smells of pine and powder. Your fingers have forgotten what warmth meant. Even your heartbeat has learned to whisper. Then, a flicker. Not movement, but intention. The smallest tremor of light where snow meets steel. You freeze. Let your eyes do the walking. A scope flash, brief as a sigh. He's close. Too close for comfort, too far for certainty. Between you lies a field of shallow ridges, the footprints of last night's patrol already filling with frost. You adjust the glass, find an angle where trees form a sentence of shadows. At the end of it, a branch moves wrong, slow, deliberate, human. You breathe once, twice, then let the air go. The shot breaks the sky. Snow leaps up like startled birds. Silence rushes in behind the noise, heavier than before. You wait. A minute. 5. 10. The branch does not move again. Only when dusk bends the light do you crawl forward, slow enough to be part of the landscape. At the ridge you find nothing. No body, no rifle, only a hollow in the snow shaped like patience itself. The second day. Command calls it a stalemate. You call it a conversation. He is still out there. You feel him tracing your shadow from another angle. Every shot fired elsewhere sounds like a question meant for you. You answer by waiting. At night you dig deeper into the drift, turning snow into architecture. Inside the small white cave you light a single match, warm your fingers, study the frost forming on the rifle barrel. The metal glows faintly, breathing with you. Sleep comes in fragments, 10 minutes here, a blink there. Dreams repeat the same geometry, crosshairs aligning, never touching. You wake with the sense that someone has been looking through you. Before dawn, you move again, following instinct more than map. The forest has learned your scent. It no longer warns you. Somewhere ahead, a raven barks once, then another. The sound forms coordinates. You take them seriously. The trap. The duel lasts 3 days before it finds its sentence. On the 4th, you build the bait. A helmet on a stick, a scrap of grey cloth, a hint of movement where no person could survive exposure. Then you retreat 30 meters, angle the scope through dead grass frozen into glass. Hours stretch. Your mind folds time into repetition. Pulse, wind, frost. Even memory grows quiet. Then, the whisper of a shot. Snow spits near the decoy. The helmet jerks once, and the forest goes still again. You have him. You trace the sound backward, through echo and instinct. There, a patch of white too perfect. A mound breathing just wrong. Your own shot leaves before you know it's begun. The recoil nudges your shoulder. The barrel exhales. No scream. Just the smallest shift, as though the snow itself had sighed. When you approach at dusk, you find what was once an enemy and is now only proof of endurance. A rifle half buried, a photograph in a pocket, a woman and a child in summer, light so bright it hurts to look. You set the picture beside him, cover both with snow. The duel ends without footsteps. Only the wind moves, rearranging its memory of who waited longer. Lessons in stillness. Back at camp, they call it a victory. You do not argue, but neither do you agree. The price of precision is that you can no longer aim at anything ordinary. Irina listens as you describe the moment in as few words as possible. She nods once, then hands you tea so hot it burns. For the first time in days, you feel the difference between pain and cold. That night, you clean the rifle slowly, each motion a kind of apology. The metal remembers everything. You wipe until it forgets enough to rest. Outside, the aurora stirs faintly, green veins across a black sky. You look up, and for a heartbeat the colors resemble the glass you stared through. Bright, fragile, infinite. You whisper to the night, not sure who you're addressing. May patience be enough. Chapter 7. Winter Inheritance. The new arrivals. They come with eyes still wide, boots too clean, rifles that smell of factory oil instead of frost. You watch them from the edge of the yard, a small column of strangers carrying weight they don't yet understand. Their uniforms hang loose, their laughter too quick. One of them, barely 20, still waves when a train whistle sounds in the distance. It takes weeks before she learns that nothing returns by rail anymore. Command calls it reinforcement. You call it inheritance, not of medals or glory, but of patience, fear, and the discipline of silence. They listen to stories half-whispered by veterans. How the snow hides your heartbeat. How to read the wind by how it touches the back of your neck. How not to blink when death stands politely at the edge of your sight line. You see yourself in them, and it feels like meeting your own reflection. Younger, louder, unscarred. You wonder if the forest will be as kind to them as it was to you. Lessons of the field. The first lesson begins at dawn, as all lessons here do. The sun barely clears the tree-line, spilling gold across frost that glitters like broken promises. You line them up, 5 recruits, their faces red with cold and anticipation. "Lie down," you say, voice quiet enough that they must lean in to hear. The command is simple, but obedience isn't. They hesitate, glancing at the snow as though it might swallow them. Eventually, they lower themselves, awkward, giggling. You wait. The forest waits with you. "Now," you whisper, "breathe." It takes them minutes to realize breathing can be trained, that lungs are instruments, that even exhalation can aim. You walk the line, correcting elbows, adjusting shoulders, pressing palms into earth until the world steadies. Their eyes meet yours, seeking approval that never comes aloud. You nod once. That is enough. Later, they learn camouflage. The ritual of vanishing. White cloth, pine boughs, smoke mixed with dirt to dull the shine of skin. One asks, "Why hide if we fight with honor?" You answer, "Because the snow honors only those who disappear." No one argues. By afternoon, the giggling is gone. Only breathing remains, uneven but improving, like a language half remembered. The old hands. The veterans gather around the stove that never burns bright enough. Faces mapped with exhaustion, hands shaking slightly when lifted from warmth. They speak in fragments, sentences that fade into smoke before they reach endings. Yelena mends her gloves with thread pulled from a flag. Rosa hums a tune so low it could be mistaken for wind. Irina counts morphine vials and murmurs prayers she claims not to believe. You join them quietly, listening. Each carries a private mythology. The one who crawled for 2 days through no man's snow. The one who aimed by the sound of breathing rather than sight. The one who never missed and never smiled again. Someone mentions spring. A pause follows, long, uncertain. Spring feels like rumor. The fire pops once, dismissing it. When the recruits enter, voices stop. They look up at these ghosts made of bone and resolve. For the first time, they understand what patience costs. The memory of light. Even war must make room for small mercies. A day arrives without orders, without shells, without the usual arithmetic of survival. You take the recruits to the ridge, where the sky opens wide enough to remember color. The sun surprises everyone by showing up. For a few hours, the world glows gold instead of gray. Helmets shine, rifles steam in thawing air, laughter returns shyly. Someone finds an accordion missing 2 notes and makes it sing anyway. You sit apart, watching. For once, the sound doesn't hurt. You think of home, of letters unsent, of the way silence sometimes feels like company. When clouds move in again, you rise first, brushing snow from your knees. Duty doesn't end, it only waits. The recruits follow, their footprints overlapping yours until the path looks almost new. As you march back toward the front, the wind changes, warmer, almost tender. It carries the faintest scent of birch sap. You breathe it in, and for a moment the air tastes like a promise. Passing it on. That night, around the dim stove, a recruit asks what it feels like to aim at someone for the first time. You answer slowly, choosing words as if they might bruise. It feels like waiting too long to blink. Another asks if you count. You shake your head. Counting is for the living. They fall silent, eyes on the fire. You can tell the lesson has landed. Before sleeping, you check your rifle one last time, not for readiness, but for memory. The wood carries the warmth of your hand. The steel breathes faintly against the night air. You whisper, "You'll teach them too." The recruits dream in uneven rhythms, the veterans in fragments. The snow covers all of you with the same white grammar, a page that never runs out of space. Chapter 8. When the Forest Spoke. The first crack of spring. It begins with a sound so small you almost ignore it. A drip. Then another. Then a chorus. The forest that once slept under your watch begins to move again. Snow slides from branches, landing with soft thuds that sound almost like footsteps. You flinch before remembering that the world is allowed to breathe again. The river, long sealed under glass, starts whispering beneath its skin of ice. At night, you hear it shifting, restless, alive, remembering how to run. Even the wind changes tone, less of a knife now, more of a sigh. You should welcome it. Instead, it unsettles you. Stillness was your shield. Now motion feels like exposure. The recruits smile, collecting twigs, talking of flowers as though they remember what they look like. You nod, but inside you grieve the silence melting away. Patience is harder to keep when the world begins again. The sound of water. The front has moved west, leaving scars of trenches now filled with meltwater. You walk through them, boots sinking in mud that gurgles like speech. Birds return, bold, absurd, loud. Their songs break over the ruins like laughter in a church. One morning, Irina finds a sprig of grass growing through a crack in the ice. She kneels beside it as if greeting a survivor. "Look," she says. You look, but it frightens you. Green seems too fragile for this landscape. Later, you take a position on a ridge that used to be a battlefield. All winter it was silent, a map drawn in white and shadow. Now the air hums with melt. The scope fogs easily, refusing to focus. Targets move not because of enemy fire, but because the wind finally has room to play again. You wipe condensation from the lens, but it returns faster each time. The glass no longer knows what it's supposed to see. The forgotten dead. When the snow withdraws, it reveals what it has been guarding. Helmets, boots, the faint geometry of men who fell before the freeze. You walk carefully between them, each step an apology. A sleeve sticks out from the mud, its hand still holding something. A button, a photograph, a small piece of wood shaped like a bird. You wonder if the forest carved it for him, or if he carved it for the forest. You cover the hand with what remains of your scarf. It feels like translation, one form of stillness exchanged for another. The recruits behind you stare, unsure whether to look away or bow. You tell them quietly, "The ground remembers better than we do." They nod, not sure what the sentence means, only that it sounds true. That evening, you write nothing. There are some images language shouldn't touch. When the birds returned. The first lark arrives at dawn. Its song cuts clean through sleep, bright and disbelieving. You lie awake, hand over your face, listening. The notes feel like they're mocking your quiet discipline. The forest has begun its own conversation again, one that doesn't include you. The others smile at the noise. You envy their ease. For months, you trained to erase sound. Now sound surrounds you, and you no longer know how to live inside it. Rosa laughs and says, "The war can't find us if the birds sing loud enough." You don't correct her. Superstitions deserve oxygen too. That night, around the stove, someone hums the same song the lark sang that morning. You find yourself tapping a finger in rhythm, then stopping, afraid that rhythm might turn into joy, and joy might be mistaken for forgetting. The river breaks. The Volga sheds its ice in a single day, like a lung deciding to inhale after months of restraint. Chunks of white drift downstream, carrying bits of branches, paper, and once-lost helmets. From a distance, it looks like the river is returning its dead. You stand on the bank, rifle slung, coat open, air tasting of thaw. The sound is overwhelming, crashing, cracking, rushing, a language too alive for what you've become. The recruits cheer as one block of ice splits, revealing clear water beneath. You smile, faintly. It feels like watching someone else's happiness through glass. A gull swoops overhead, its cry high and human. Irina turns to you and says, "Maybe this is what victory sounds like." You answer, "Maybe it's just water remembering its way home." When you close your eyes, you see the winter version of the same place, quiet, deliberate, perfect in its stillness. You realize you will miss that world, the one shaped by silence and patience. But you also understand that no one can live there forever. The forest speaks now. It names everything you tried not to feel. And though the noise hurts at first, you listen, because you've spent too long teaching yourself not to. Chapter 9. The Long Return. The departure that didn't feel like one. The orders arrive folded and damp, as if even paper has learned to cry in secret. Demobilization. Rotation home. The words look simple, almost kind, but their meaning is difficult to trust. You pack without ceremony. A scarf, a notebook, the empty casing you kept for luck. The rifle goes into its crate, cleaned, oiled, and heavier than before, as if aware it's being left behind. At the edge of the yard, trucks wait like enormous questions. Engines cough into life. Exhaust mixes with the smell of thawing earth. The recruits wave, some crying openly, others too tired for gestures. You wave back once, unsure if you're saying goodbye or permission to forget. The forest watches you go, unblinking. It doesn't promise to remember, but you know it will. Train of mirrors. The train moves east, towards cities that still exist. Inside the carriage, every window becomes a mirror at night. You see yourself multiplied, 20 faces of the same woman, each a little older, each pretending to rest. Irina sits across from you, knitting something small, rhythmic. When you ask what it is, she says, "A habit." You both smile at that, tired and unconvincing. Outside, the landscape shifts from ruins to fields, from white to green, from silence to the murmur of rebuilding. Smoke rises not from gunfire now, but from stoves. People stand on platforms again, waving not rifles but hands. Children appear, real, noisy, alive. You catch yourself staring. The sight feels foreign, almost indecent in its joy. A man offers you bread through the window at a stop. You hesitate, then take it. The crust burns your tongue. It tastes of forgiveness you haven't earned. At night, you dream of the forest still whispering your name. When you wake, the sound is gone, replaced by the steady clatter of wheels, the new rhythm of survival. Home that isn't. Home is smaller than memory. Walls seem closer, ceilings lower, colors brighter to the point of cruelty. You stand in the doorway, unsure where to put your rifle that isn't there. Your mother cries quietly, touching your face as if trying to match it to a photograph she no longer owns. You tell her you are well. She doesn't believe you, but she pretends to. That is love's job now, to pretend. Neighbors visit with smiles that stop short of the eyes. They ask questions in soft tones. Was it terrible? Were you afraid? You answer with stories about weather and food, not blood. They nod, relieved, eager to keep their own versions of the war intact. At night, the bed feels wrong, too soft, too safe. You wake at every creak, expecting orders. You check the window for glints of glass that aren't there. Even silence feels suspicious. You open your notebook and write a single line. Peace is louder than I remembered. What the world decides to remember. Months pass. The newspapers speak of victory and reconstruction. Men return with medals and parades. The women return to anonymity. Your name appears once in a column of commendations, spelled wrong, the number of kills incorrect by a margin too small to matter. You cut the clipping and keep it between the pages of your notebook anyway. At the university, a professor recognizes you and asks you to lecture about female participation in the war. You stand before a hall of polite students and realize your throat can't shape the words. Instead, you tell them about snow, about waiting, about how the world sounds when you stop breathing to listen. They applaud, though they don't understand. That is enough. Sometimes you visit Irina in the hospital where she now works. Her hands are steady again, her laugh warmer. She gives you tea that smells of mint instead of metal. You talk about gardens, and how absurd it feels to plan for flowers when the ground still remembers so much else. The city builds monuments, stone men, bronze horses. No statues of women with rifles. You don't mind, not exactly. You just wish the silence around them were a little less perfect. What remains? One evening, you walk to the river. The Volga runs clear now, its surface smooth as memory. Children skip stones where bodies once floated. Each ripple erases a small piece of history, and maybe that's merciful. You find a quiet spot and sit. The wind smells of wet grass and wood smoke. You take from your coat pocket a small folded paper, the letter to your mother you never sent. The ink has faded into blue-gray veins. You read it one last time, then tear it gently and let the pieces go. They drift downstream, small white boats surrendering to distance. The sky darkens, the river shines. You close your eyes and imagine the sound of the forest, its hush, its patience, its strange affection for those who could wait. You realize you carry that silence with you still, and always will. When you open your eyes, the stars have begun their quiet shift above the horizon. You rise, brush the dirt from your coat, and start home, the slow walk of someone who has learned that return is just another kind of mission. Epilogue: The breath that stayed. Even now, if you walk far enough into the birch forests east of Smolensk, you can still hear it, a hush that feels deliberate, as if the trees are keeping a secret they've grown fond of. Wind moves through branches that once held snipers' nests, whispering names that no one taught them. The snow here, when it comes, falls softly, not with grief, not with pride, just with memory. It lands on moss, on stone, on the faint geometry of fox tracks. It erases nothing. It only rearranges silence. You kneel, touch the ground. It's colder than you expect, but it answers, faintly. Somewhere beneath, a spent casing sleeps beside a root, two shapes that long ago stopped disagreeing. The earth, it turns out, is fluent in patience. History will remember numbers. It will call them 2,484 trained, 500 deployed, 150 who did not come home. But history doesn't know the sound of a trigger breathed into stillness, or the ache of hands thawing too quickly, or the way snow takes on a different color just before sunrise. You imagine one of them, perhaps you, perhaps another, lying here decades ago, cheek pressed to wood, heartbeat counting down a century in advance. She is waiting for a signal that never came. Or maybe she became the signal itself. Somewhere, a bird calls. Its note is sharp, almost human. The forest answers with rustle instead of echo. And for a moment, it's enough. In a museum somewhere, a rifle rests behind glass. A placard reads Female Sniper Rifle, Eastern Front, circa 1943. Visitors pass, whisper, move on. They do not notice the faint fog that gathers on the inside of the glass, the breath that never left. In an old apartment in Moscow, a woman in her 90s folds laundry by the window. Her hands move slow, deliberate. On the sill sits a single bullet casing, polished smooth from years of touch. Outside, children play, their laughter rising like smoke, and she smiles without knowing why. When night comes, she dreams not of battles, but of stillness. The perfect, unbroken silence before the shot, when the world held its breath and became infinite. She wakes, opens the window, and listens to the city breathe. It is loud, alive, imperfect, and she loves it all the more for that. Somewhere, wind slides across a rifle barrel half buried in snow. Somewhere else, a letter lies in the earth, its ink faded but its intention intact. And somewhere within you, yes, you, the listener, a small part of that patience remains. You have heard the sound of waiting. You have felt the weight of breath measured against time. You have walked beside the women who turned silence into accuracy, endurance into art. Close your eyes. Listen. The forest is still speaking, not of death, but of what survives it. Snow, wind, patience, the breath that stayed. Aftermath, the breath that stays. The snow is gone now, mostly. Patches of it linger in the hollows, thin and reluctant, as if unsure whether it's still needed. The forest smells of thaw, pine, mud, gun oil buried deep in the soil. Somewhere, a river runs unseen beneath its own ice, whispering of movement. The wind has changed direction, carrying the faint sound of trains, of distance returning. You walk the same ground where they once lay, the women of the Sniper Corps. There are no footprints left to follow, only memory folded into frost. The bunkers have sunk back into the earth. The firing range is a meadow now, dotted with wildflowers the color of old medals. The world, indifferent but enduring, has reclaimed its shape. Their rifles rest in museums, their names engraved on plaques that few stop to read. Ludmila Pavlichenko, Rosa Shanina, Tatyana Baramzina. Women who counted their kills in whispers, who stitched each shot into the fabric of a war that barely made room for them. History lists their numbers, 309 confirmed, 59 42, as if courage could be measured that way. But the truer record is quieter. It lives in what they saw through the scope and what they chose not to forget. They were not killers by nature. They were watchful souls trained to slow time. Each carried a patience so sharp it could wound. Each learned that breath could be both weapon and prayer. And in the long hours between shots, they became philosophers of silence. They learned what the forest already knew, that endurance is a kind of truth. You stand at the edge of that forest now. The ground beneath you is soft, damp with melted snow. The trees lean inward, their trunks dark with memory. It's easy to imagine them still here, a figure prone among roots, another kneeling beside a scope, their breath fogging and fading, the faint smell of wool and frost. They waited in this cold for hours, days, entire seasons, holding still while the world turned violent around them. And yet, inside that stillness, they carved something sacred, a defiance made of breath, a devotion to precision that was also care. When the war ended, many of them went home quietly. Some married, raised children, worked in factories or farms. Others carried the silence with them too far, into nights where dreams still wore winter uniforms. They were not welcomed as heroes. There were no parades for women who had learned to shoot better than most men. But they had already learned not to wait for applause. They had waited enough. The world forgot, as it always does. The medals tarnished, the uniforms were folded away, and memory thinned like smoke in sunlight. Yet somewhere in the endless forests of the East, their presence remains. In the hush before snowfall, in the stillness between wind gusts, in the quiet confidence of anyone who refuses to look away. You kneel and touch the ground. It's cold, but not unkind. The earth holds everything, the weight of their rifles, the warmth of their last breath, the patience they taught it. The forest answers with a sound you can barely hear, not a voice, not a word, just a rhythm, a heartbeat drawn out across decades. They taught the world something rare. That strength can look like stillness. That precision is a kind of compassion when aimed against chaos. That courage does not need noise to prove itself. As evening gathers, the air cools again. The light fades to blue, that color between silence and memory. A crow calls from a far branch, and the echo folds into the trees. You imagine one of them there, lying in the snow, eyes steady, heartbeat even, waiting for a world that will one day learn her name. The frost returns overnight, as it always does. It glitters faintly on the rifle marks carved long ago into wood. It covers everything, the living and the gone, in a single pale forgiveness. And when you exhale, your breath joins theirs, lingering in the cold just a moment longer before vanishing into air that remembers. Thank you for listening. You've been part of Echoes of War, where stories rise on quiet wings. and the past still circles above us, refusing to land.